Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today. All
right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast with Kevin and Chuck. Today, we're going to talk about Plan B. And what I mean is like a contingency plan. It turns out in the real world, things don't always go exactly as expected. The world isn't always rainbows and sunshine. I mean, for Kevin, it is. If you were Kevin, you'd just wake up and birds would be, chirping, cigars would be smoking, beer would be drinking, and, just glitter. And yeah, it's a beautiful day, It's always 70 degrees and everything is great. Well, that's not always the case. So, basically what you need to kind of, as a prepper, right, we prepare. And I mean, to be honest, being a prepper, that really is Plan B.
Right.
Like we're already like, hey, the world might turn to shit. And I don't think that we're doom and gloom. I don't think we're, people who are looking for the world to fail. I think we are taking a practical approach. We're covering the downside. You always have to have some kind of backup or you're kind of an idiot.
Right.
That's kind of how it works. I mean, shit, you go out to dinner if, the restaurant's closed. Oh, shit, what are we going to do? You have a backup in your mind. Now, the backup may be, hitting McDonald's on the way home, or it might be that you have to go home and eat the can of tuna fish that you have there. But hopefully, you don't just have ketchup packets in your refrigerator. I mean, that's what you do. You plan a little bit, right? You don't wait to go to the grocery store until you have 0 food items in your house. Mm-hmm. And then be like, oh, shit, So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Now, first, I'm excited. We actually have a new sponsor.
All right.
We've had some sponsors here and there throughout the years. And one of the things that is always like a Plan B contingency for me is having enough ammo. And I shoot through some ammo, right? So I'll freaking, I'll drop 1,000 rounds in a weekend.
Right.
And because, I might have my buddies over and, everyone will cringe right now, but, maybe we'll drink some beers. And some
no,
guns,
you
right?
never mix alcohol and firearms. Chuck, come on.
Train like you fight. Train like you fight. So anyway, I didn't necessarily say that those two things happen at the same time. I actually just read a story on the internet of it was a YouTube video actually, but with it said Army Rangers versus the Crips.
Okay.
And they were like, what would happen? Apparently that happened in real life. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm just saying, they had a barbecue with beers and fought the Crips,
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. So anyway, you're like, well, Chuck, you haven't even told us who this sponsor is. Hold your breath. Ammoseek.com. So you guys know that ammo's been hard to find. It's been expensive. And it's finally coming back around where I can almost afford to shoot my guns again.
Yeah, the problem with ammo lately though is that it's, like you said, it's hard to find and the price has been high. But also it's hit and miss. You know what I mean? And places that I might normally go for something, their shelf might be empty of the specific type I'm looking for. And this is kind of a
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things for me is 300 blackout. It's not everywhere. It's hard to find. I just went on Ammo Seek. They have tons of 300 blackout and for reasonable prices. It wasn't now Ammo Seek isn't the seller. They're 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 basically a search engine that's going to get you straight on where to go for, what you want, right? They're going to show you all the different prices, who's got it, and do they charge shipping? That's a big thing, right? Because the shipping is going to affect your cost per round, right? That makes a big difference to me. I don't know. So they sort it all out. These are all websites. The cool thing is they actually have a list of their retailers of all the sites they have. And then people from Ammo Seek, like customers, go and rate the different sellers. So you can say, all right, I'm willing to take the risk for that price. These are the reviews I'm reading. It's somebody I'm willing to take a chance on. Plus, their site has a lot of freaking coupons, which makes things awesome.
Yeah, it's also really user-friendly. Very easy to use and very easy to find what you're looking for.
A lot of them are all like pictures and nonsense. This is kind of like your old school, no BS, just lay it out. Look, here's your price. Here's who's selling it. Here's type of ammo it is, the grain, the caliber, the whole deal. And then here's what shipping is. Here's your dollar per round. You can separate. You can say, hey, I only want you to show me ones with brass casings, right? Sometimes you have to weed through, Russian Wolf ammo or Tula or whatever. You go through all those before you even get to anything good. And, maybe steel case cheap ammo that you can throw down range through a tired old gun is what you're looking for. Maybe you're like, hey, I wish ammo was 30 cents a round. Guess what? It can be.
Right.
That's the beauty. You get to decide what you want. You put in your search parameters and you make it happen. So I'm just saying, ammoseek.com. I'll put it on the Facebook. I'll put it in the show notes. And I don't think it's that hard to remember, honestly. And I bet a lot of you guys have been there. But I would actually like to remind you, check it out. Because it turns out they got a lot of good deals right now going on. And ammo's coming down. It's time to get out and make your dreams come true. So moving right along. What other kind of things might happen that might throw you a curveball, Kevin? I know I was just reading on Facebook this morning, one of the people had, it was in like a self-help motivation kind of group that I follow.
Uh-huh.
And the girl's like, yeah, I'm always super motivated and doing stuff. I was writing a book. I was building a website course and doing all this. And then I came home and my house burned down and they kind of lost everything. And they were like, everybody, my family, friends, whatever, we have somewhere to stay. The insurance is working it out, but I got to make a list of everything, my entire life. And she was like, it's so crippling and devastating that she was like, she's like, I'm about to put my book out and I'm afraid to do it because I'm afraid of what'll go wrong and how I can get hurt.
Right.
And she's like, and I was such a motivated person before, and now I'm like gun shy because when you get a devastating blow, it can really cripple you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things, if you don't prepare or consider possibilities, you can really get blindsided by what comes.
Right.
And that's kind of what this, this one episode, but kind of what the podcast is all about is having you consider things and realize you can kind of make it through anything. It's the right attitude. It's approaching things, with a way, you just keep going till you're dead.
Right.
But let's find a way to make it work. I know if I died, right, I wouldn't want my family, my kids, my wife to be like, oh, this is so sad. I can't go on. Life's so hard without him. I'd want them to be like, shit, he's gone. I'm going to freaking go kick ass and do my thing, you know? And yeah, you want to be appreciated and loved, but I don't need to be loved when I'm gone, you know? You want the best for your family, right? Isn't that what we all want? We want them to have the best things in life. And you got to keep freaking going on. You got to keep fighting. So, Kevin, what kind of things might catch you off guard?
Well, one of the things that I think a lot of people underestimate is the low-level natural disasters. One of the things I'm used to up here is that a couple of times every winter, the power is going to go out. And most people in this area have power that's basically runs off the electricity, whether it's electric heating or, your furnace takes an electric charge to start up, your hot water heater, all that sort of stuff. It can be, when it's 20 degrees out, it gets cold real fast in your house if you don't have some sort of a plan already. But that goes for a lot of things. If you're in if you live in New Orleans and there's a Category 5 hurricane coming, you need to be prepared to get out of there. So those natural disasters that occur occasionally, you need to have a backup plan. Tornadoes come through the Midwest and tear up houses all the time. And you might have lived in the North, in the Midwest for 20 years and never even seen a tornado. That doesn't mean that you're immune from it. The same thing in California with earthquakes. You have earthquakes all the time. Most of them are, lower level and, they shake for a few minutes and then life goes back to normal. But every once in a while, they get one of the serious earthquakes out there that really causes some damage. A lot of these basic natural disasters that we hear about and that we think about occasionally eventually happen to you. And have a basic plan to cover your electricity, to cover your heating, to cover your medical if an ambulance isn't able to get to your house immediately. Those are the sorts of things that preppers should be getting ready for. And I think a lot of preppers have this doomsday mindset where they're preparing for the end of the world. But really what the main thing you should be prepping for are these basic 3 or 4 day emergencies where you're going to be out of power, where you're not going to be able to have access. You might not even be able to get to the grocery store, let alone, the grocery store shelves being empty. Your car might not be able to get down the road. Last week we had a big rainstorm and we have great drainage here, but one of the drainage pipes clogged up. And the road heading out of my community was, about 6 inches deep in water. It's not a big deal. You can drive through that, but really not something you want to have to drive through if you don't want to. You don't know what's under that water. The road could have been washed out, or, you might end up getting halfway through there and realizing that your tire sunk in something and you're not going anywhere anymore. Some of these basic disasters that can last 2 or 3 days are really the most likely events to happen. And that's something that these backup plans, these are some of the things that you should be thinking about short term. Now let's talk real quick about power failures. 2 or 3 days without power, it's usually not a big deal. You can survive, but what about all the meat you have in your freezer? Do you have a plan for this? Are you going to eat a whole side of beef, or do you have a generator, ready to go? Are you going to be able to, obviously you're not going to be using any power tools, but if you're going to be doing any work, do you have hand tools? Do you know how to drive a nail? Do you know how to use a handsaw? Those are some basic skills that I feel like a lot of people forget about when it's so easy to run an extension cord into the backyard. You can just you run out of gas for your chainsaw, just run down to the gas station up the street. But what if you can't get up the street for a few days and you have a couple of trees in your yard here? Do you have backup fuel? Do you have a backup chainsaw? Do you have a backup chain? A lot of these things are you don't think about it until it's a problem. When you get in that emergency, you say, oh shit, I wish I had an extra chain because this one's dull and it's not really doing anything. And so I think preparing for a lot of those sorts of situations is kind of a prepper go-to when it comes to having two of something, having two of everything. Why not have two of everything? Why buy one when you can get two for just double the price, But that is a limiting factor that a lot of people have. Are you going to spend the extra $20 for a chainsaw blade when the one you have on your chainsaw is working just fine right now? Are you going to worry about, stocking up on canned goods when you have a freezer full of meat? Are you going to worry about, a lot of these things that you might not think of might become a serious emergency, and that $30 plan could have saved you a lot of headaches.
Well, to be honest, like the initial outlay, like you can't wake up in the morning and be like, hey, I'm just going to buy double everything from now on.
Right.
Well, turns out that might actually cost you twice as much as you're spending. And so you realize like, hey, maybe that's not possible. But what if, all right, you know what? I have a little extra money in my pocket this week, and instead of buying nonsense, when the lawnmower belt broke, I buy two, and then I have one on the shelf. And so now when the next one breaks, I just have to buy one, but I have one to go immediately.
Right.
Now I know that the lawnmower isn't the big crisis, right? It's like, oh God, the grass is high. But damn, how easy is it that when my lawnmower belt broke the other day, I jump off, I go in the barn, grab a belt and throw it back on, and I'm rolling 10 minutes later. That's the difference. It just ends up making your life flow more smoothly. And, people talk about as you go through life, right? When you get like right now, all right, things are getting away from us. When we get raises at work or a little bump, inflation is coming so fast and so hard that you kind of need that money, right? Like you already, just to make your budget work the way it was working 6 months ago, you kind of need that raise.
Right.
But it used to be kind of the mindset that, hey, live within your means. Now you got a better job, you're living a little better. How about you save that little bit of extra? That's when you can be buying these extra items. You kind of plan and set things up for the future, your plan B. How many times as a kid do we hear, oh, you got to save for your retirement? You won't even notice it if you take 10% of your paycheck and put it aside. And we're all like, yeah, but I'll be making more money later, so I'll worry about it then.
Right.
It'll be so much easier when I'm making $100,000 a year, or, whatever fantasy that people have. But you need to kind of take into the reality, the right now, and start to make those changes. You don't have to do it right away, but you need to start implementing. You don't need to go full on, crazy like me and Kevin. It's funny, we had a listener send us an email this week about 3 or 4 days ago, Tim, and I've been nagging Kevin to write this guy back, but Kevin's kind of a tool like that, so he hasn't. But Tim lives in the desert, and he's been listening to the podcast, right? And he's like, you know what? I got tired of hearing you guys bitch about water and everything like that, and realized I'm not going to be a jackass to my family. And he set up 150-gallon water supply, basically. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, the way it looked, I don't know all the details. He did send some pictures. But the way it looked, he's probably running his water through 150-gallon, 3 tanks that are 55 gallons or whatever.
Right.
And stacking it up. So he's always got a fresh water supply, and he's got a water supply that'll last. Well, it turns out if you live in the desert, this is something you should be thinking about as a prepper, but so many people just fall short on these things. They're like, yeah, but it probably won't happen because it hasn't happened to me before. And that's the thing, we get complacent. And, well, gas has never been $20 a gallon before, or $10 a gallon, but one day it might be $10 a gallon when you drive by.
It might be next week,
and it might be next week, If my gas station's crazy, I don't even know if I mentioned this last week or not, but I drive by and it said $9 and something on the sign. Now it was only $4.90 or whatever, $4.30. I don't know. But it said $9. You know what? I was like, I believe it. I just didn't even like bat an eye at it. I was like, yeah, that sounds right. Because guess what? That shit can happen. It's real. Maybe that's not going to be what it is, but maybe beef and chicken are getting so hard to process that all of a sudden they're $7, $8 a pound. And I was just talking to a guy. My wife goes to a farmer's market and sells a lot of the produce and flowers and stuff that we sell or that we grow here. And she's over there right now. And I was talking to the guy that we get beef and chicken from. And he's like, yeah, a buddy of mine just asked me to help him process his chickens. And another chicken seller is like, yeah, what do you charge for that? What do we do? Dude, he's like, yeah, I told him, he goes, I didn't want to do it. So I told him $6 a chicken just to process it.
Right.
And the guy was like, great, that's the best deal I heard. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I was driving 100 miles to get somebody to process my chickens because I can't find anyone. And he goes, and now $6 is better than what he's offering. Mm-hmm. And the guy's like, shit, I charge too little.
Yeah.
But, that's the insane world we live in right now. And, so my point is not that it costs $6 to process a chicken. My point is chicken is getting more and more expensive and you need to cover the downside. I was just reading one of the groups I follow on Facebook is rabbits. I think it's like Rabbits for Sustenance and shit or something like that. And I think literally though that's the name. But anyway, so the point is, ladies like, yeah, dog food is over $1 a pound and I can do rabbit meat for way less. She's like, I'm freaking feeding my family and the dogs. The dogs are getting fresh rabbit meat as opposed to,
right,
the dog food from the store, which is insane that that's actually more cost efficient. I kind of was curious how much are you paying for rabbit feed? I kind of wanted to get in there. Like, is there really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you raise your rabbits properly, really they should be self-sustaining if they have a big enough area, but it is one of those things. A lot of people talk about chickens, talk about ducks and goats and all sorts of stuff. But that is something to take into consideration. How much are you spending to produce that meat? How much are you spending per pound just to feed those animals? And if you have a big area, it might be almost nothing, But if you have a small penned-in area, you have predators and you don't want them getting at your chickens and you want to keep them penned in all day, it can be a little bit expensive to maintain those chickens.
Right.
But it is one of those situations where you have to think about having a backup plan when you go to the feed store and there's no rabbit feed. I know there was one of the forums I was on the other day. Somebody had mentioned about raising rabbits and it was just comment after comment about rabbit starvation and blah blah blah. You can't just eat. Well, we're not talking about just eating rabbit. We're not in the wilderness, and the only thing we could catch is rabbit after rabbit, and now we're going to die.
Here's the beauty is, right, here's the beauty. When you have nothing else and rabbit sounds better than eating zero. But I assume that we're not at the point that we have nothing else.
Right.
Turns out you can grow like lettuce and carrots and all kinds of shit.
Just right out there in your yard.
Rabbits.
Turns out it just grows right in the grass next to your house.
And, I got to say, if you get creative and you watch a little YouTube, it turns out that people with these like little patios in New York City and shit, which I don't even know who can afford to have a patio in New York City, but just the same, people with little patios are growing like tons of freaking fresh food. Turns out you can actually grow in very, very small spaces if you get a little creative. And those of you with bigger yards, I mean, if you have 50 by 50 backyard, you can grow some serious food. You don't need acres of land if you're just worried about taking care of your family. But that's the thing. People really need to start thinking about their own food supply, about getting their own stuff on their property that they're producing. And, even better if you can find stuff to trade with your neighbors and get people doing the same thing. I mean, that's one of the big things I love about my wife doing this farmers market is I meet all these people who are growing and doing all the, same things, and we're able to get meat from them. They get vegetables and flowers from us, and we get vegetables from other guys, and we sell eggs to other people, and that kind of thing. It's pretty awesome. It's great to be able to network and share with each other and have a local source. That's the thing. When the meat and the chicken supply runs out, turns out people are going to eggs for their protein.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the local guy who's, growing the cows and doing the business. So, that's something to think about.
Yeah. Now, do you want to talk a little bit about bugging out? I know we had a whole podcast about why you should not bug out. But if we're talking about plan Bs, if we're talking about backup plans, it is something we should talk about. Now, hypothetically, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to bug out right this second. Grab your bag and get in the car and go. You want to have, it's great to have a bug out bag. And I 100% support anybody, getting a bug out bag together. I got mine and I'm all set. And I think it's a great idea to have at your house. But you want to be able to plan a little bit. Hopefully you have a few hours where you can open up your bug out bag and look in there, maybe your bug out bag that you have sitting in your basement or in your closet that just sits there, year after year, month after month, at least. You might want to freshen up that food that's in there if you have a chance. You might want to, pack a couple extra bottles of water that you didn't have in there already. You might have a water filter, but you might want to grab a couple of the things that you really are going to need on a long-term situation. But more importantly, where are you going? Where are you planning on bugging out to? Do you have a location in mind? Is it your uncle's house that, lives 100 miles out of the city? Are you just planning on going to the woods? Because let me tell you something, that's not a great idea. Just going to the woods, because a lot of people are just going to the woods. You really need to have
but what if I just go to the
of,
woods, but a little bit farther?
Right. Well, a little bit further. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But, it's one of those things is you might want to have a connection with another person. If things go bad over there, you come here. If things go bad here, I'm going to go over there. And I'm not talking about your neighbor, the guy that lives across the street. I mean, somebody that's a good distance away that can get you out of harm's way. If you're going to bug out, you're going to want to bug out. You're going to want to be getting out of the area. If there's a forest fire that's coming towards your house, you don't want to go, 3 blocks down the street. You want to be out. You want to bug out of that area. And that's really something to think about when you're, you've got an emergency coming. You've got your bags packed. You've got a full, tank of gas. You're getting in your car. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go to? Maybe it's even just a hotel that's not close by. But you're going to want to get to have a secondary location where you're planning on going to. Because, guess what? If you're bugging out, probably a lot of people in your area are bugging out too. I know that it was a real situation during that Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans. It wasn't, you couldn't just go, 20 miles and find a hotel room because everybody did that. You want to have a better plan than everybody around you.
Go 30 miles.
There you go. 30 miles is going to get you.
See? I'm one-upping them every time.
Now, when we talk about bugging out, one of the things I like to think about, and I do this myself, and maybe I don't have the best hidden cache out there. But hidden cache is definitely something that you wanna think about. And a hidden cache, the idea is it's hidden. The idea is that somebody else isn't going to stumble across it and take it. Now we've talked about this a few times about how to set up a hidden cache, and there's a lot of ways to do it. Go back and listen to our podcast. But if it's a 8-inch pipe, PVC pipe with caps on it, that's 10 feet long. If it's a cooler that you have, buried some partially underground in a trash bag, something like that that's going to keep it watertight and keep it clean. But you also want the items in your cache to be sealed up well on their own.
And protected.
Yeah, and you don't want to have your hidden cache 20 feet from your house, obviously. The idea is that it's someplace that you can access that's not right by your house. So it's something to keep in mind, and it's a great idea. You can do it very inexpensive, and when it comes down to it, you might need an extra pair of gloves, a hat, and a couple of cans of food that might come in very handy.
It turns out with the current administration we have in the White House and the current ATF, that if you're listening to the Survival and Basic Badass podcast, at any minute, armed freaking, jackbooted thugs might kick in your door and come take all your guns. And they'll be like, well, we don't have any reason to arrest you or anything. We just want all your guns because, you're crazy.
And if you did listen to last week's podcast,
if that happens,
if you did listen to last week's podcast, hopefully they won't just be kicking in your door. They're going to be kicking and kicking and kicking, and you're going to have time to, get your shit together before they come in. Quick. At least put some pants on, shit.
Exactly. So I'm just saying, if all your guns weren't in the same place, maybe half of your guns were buried under your pond, then you would have a fallback go-to, right?
Right.
Those of you who've been listening to the show for a long time know about the buried under the pond gun situation. So I don't know. But
yeah, you don't want to get
saying
too
that's
far
on the
into
table.
Specifics about it. But, the idea of having your stuff backed up in an extra place. And we were talking about that a few minutes ago. Why buy one when you can buy two? I know that not everybody that listens to this podcast is a gun nut, but most of you are.
Yeah, they are. You are. Come on. AmmoSeek.com. Come on. Fill up those supplies. You know what I'm talking about. But, all right. So here's the thing. What about your long-term food storage, right? Maybe you went on like My Patriot Supply or Wise Food Storage or any of these guys, right? And you bought all this surplus, food, and you're ready to go. Then you end up like building up the big supply, and the government's like, hey, we're in a crisis. There's a food shortage, and we need stuff for our FEMA camps. And who stores food? Look, we have a list of all the people, and we broke it up by region, and we can go kick in their door and take their long-term food storage.
And if you think that couldn't happen, remember, that's legal. That is legal for the government to do.
Right.
There is a law about this.
Into the law. Right. They could do that. Now, why would they do that? Why would they write a law unless they were like, well, yeah, we might want to do that. Like, I feel like that isn't something you just on a whim. You know what we should do? We should also put this in there. Hey, look, we can go kick in the door and go take their shit. Yeah, why would you put that in there? No reason. Like, we don't ever plan on that. Would be ridiculous.
That never happened.
If you thought that, you're freaking crazy. Yeah. Why would the government do that? Well, I don't know. Why'd you put it in the law? Well, no reason.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm just saying, maybe don't store all your shit in the same spot. That's all I'm saying. And maybe make one a little bit harder to find than the other one.
Right.
You got to have something to give them. Like, if they kick in my door and I don't have a gun to hand them, they're going to be like, dude, really? Really? Come on. I saw that don't tread on me or the no quarter flag in your front lawn. Yeah, no, I'm not buying it. And they're like, I can't help but notice there's one on your hip right now. Perhaps you might have another one. All right, I do have two guns,
Right.
but the rest are buried under the pond.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
They said, they were in my boat and the boat sank. I don't know what to tell you, guy. Let's talk about some other types of backup plans. Building relationships. If you're on a first name basis with the guy at the gun shop and the neighbor down the street that's a little bit crazy that has 3 pickup trucks and 2 of them look like they might have run at one point. He's got an old backhoe in the backyard. You might want to have relationships with some of the people that might be able to help out in a situation, and some of the people that you might be able to help out in that sort of situation. Having relationships with people that are capable and competent is a smart idea.
It's funny. I'm reading a audio or listening to an audiobook right now, and they're talking about one of the guys is like supposed to be a former ranger. And he left the military because he didn't want to get the jab or whatever, and that kind of thing. So they booted his ass out. It's a fiction novel. Anyway, those of you who don't know, Army Rangers actually do a lot of training of foreign people and that kind of thing. They go in and they set up people to, be able to fight their own wars, go help the Afghanis and the different people kind of build their own militia. And Rangers are great at going in and getting people organized and getting them straight. So anyway, point is, in the audiobook, the guy's like, immediately hooks up with like a former convicted felon and whatever. And the guy's just got connections with kind of everything. Oh, you need an illegal gun. Oh, you need this. Oh, you need that. I know where to get that. They end up like banning meat that it wasn't, the animals didn't live, several years before they slaughtered them, because it's good for the planet if we let the inmate, get close to nature, that kind of shit. Anyway, point is, guys like, oh, I know where I can get you some, whatever. The whole thing is everybody's like, oh, you can't deal with criminals. You can't deal with bad people because that's wrong. Well, knowing people that can kind of work in the shadows a little bit, I'm not saying people who would steal from you and that are thugs and whatever. No, but I'm saying people who are willing to bend the laws a little bit maybe aren't such bad people to know. People who I like to call resourceful.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
I think the honest answer is I think you're a scumbag if you go and take somebody else's shit. I think that's fucked up. But to be honest, that's why I have a big problem with our government and a lot of laws because I don't like people who go and take people's shit. Right. And that's kind of my point. Those who are willing to be like, yeah, fuck you to the government who kind of is trying to oppress me, I don't really have a problem with you kind of, hey, I go and trade beef with my neighbor and they give me other stuff and somehow we keep the government out of that transaction.
Yeah, did you know you're supposed to pay taxes on that?
Technically, right. Right. That's technically illegal.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that guy who's willing to work outside the box a little bit, I don't necessarily criticize him. I personally always pay taxes and do everything on the up and up. If I go over and help my friend with the truck, I give him an invoice and I'm like, look, I gave you this for free labor, but I expect you to,
pay the equivalent
pay the
value.
Tax man because,
yeah, the equivalent value in taxes.
I gave you five hours of work here, and I'll take off for the 7 or 15 beers you gave me. But aside of that, I think the difference, the government needs to get theirs. I always make sure that happens.
Right, 100%.
But I'm just saying, other people, I wouldn't, have a problem if they did that. I'm just saying. So knowing people who work in the gray, like I said, are maybe not such a bad thing. But if you steal from people and take their shit, that's fucked up and you're wrong.
Yeah.
So,
however, I would say that in several places I've lived, I've had my own crackhead, because if you ever need something and you can't find it, that crackhead is resourceful. He'll find it and he'll have it back
He's
by
the
that
go-to
afternoon. Yeah. Yeah, they work. They'll work for that $10. They'll work for it, man. So you touched on this a
You're a
second
bad
ago.
person.
You touched on this a second ago, but barter and trade is another thing. Now, you might not be somebody that ever drinks alcohol. You might not use tobacco. You might not, have any vices at all. But that doesn't mean that everybody around you is in the same situation. A bottle of whiskey can be very valuable talking to the right person if they can't access one from a store. A carton of cigarettes might go a long way with the right person when it comes to trading. And we talked about ammo. I think generally speaking, when we talk about barter and trade, what we talk about is ammo. There's ammo that's valuable, and there's ammo that's more expensive and less likely to be needed. When it comes to trading ammo, I think the best stuff to have a stockpile of is 9mm, maybe 5.56 and 22. That's just very common. Common types that a lot of people have, and even if you don't have,
you could default to 7.62
right,
and 300 blackout. But you're right, 22 and 5.56 and 9 are the go-to.
Yeah, so even if you don't have weapons that have those calibers, if you see a good deal on AmmoSeek, you might want to pick up some 22s. You might want to pick up some 9mm.
And if you'd rather just turn it back into cash,
right,
then just call me. We'll work something out.
We can work something out.
We can work something out. You're like, wait, but now steaks are $20. I shouldn't have spent that $100 on ammo. Come see me. We'll work something out.
We can make a trade. When it comes to barter and trade, and I know that, for a fact, a lot of people, including myself at the beginning of the pandemic, did a little bit of bartering and trading with with neighbors, people that might not be growing their own vegetables, but do have something else that I'm looking for. Maybe you.
What would you be looking for, Kevin?
Maybe you want some fresh vegetables, and I need to wipe my butt, and I can't find toilet paper anywhere.
Oh, toilet paper is what we were.
I'm out here like a dumbass in the backyard with the garden hose, and I could just be wiping my butt like a king, like a doctor, just clean butthole. But that's obviously
fresh.
Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there's some things out there that you might not have. You might not be able to access, and you might have, some things that your neighbors want. And, relying on the charity of others is never a good fallback plan. But if you can make some trades.
I have a no quarter flag out front of my house.
But when it comes down to it, I mean, having some good barter skills and some items to barter is definitely a great idea. And, if you have a bottle of whiskey and you maybe open it up and have a couple of sips and close it back up, that half a bottle of whiskey will sit on your shelf and be just fine for the next 100 years without any problem. It's not going to go bad. You don't have to worry about cracking the seal on it.
If I took a shot or two and then gave it to you, that you'd be okay with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm all right with that because the alcohol cleans the germs. You know what I mean? You could drink right out of the bottle. I don't give a shit.
I gotta say, I was looking for some trade items, and I gotta say, compared to New York, alcohol is very cheap where I live.
Is it?
Turns out in the South we take care of our own, and it's cheap. So there's always like gut rot alcohol, somewhere. Well, I found this $6 whiskey. I think I might have mentioned it in a previous episode.
No, because that sounds
terrible. Every time I go in it's great. And I find every time I go in to buy liquor for me, I just pick up like 2 of the $6 bottles. Because you know how we just talked about when you get a little bump in pay or something goes on sale, well, then you just buy a little extra of it.
Yeah.
And you don't even notice it and it doesn't hurt you. So when alcohol went from $25 a bottle to $15 a bottle, now when I go buy my $15 bottle, I buy a $6 bottle to go with it. And the $6 bottle I just set on the shelf, and I have a little stack of whiskey. Now you're like, well, how would you know which $6 bottle of whiskey is going to be worth drinking? Well, it turns out you just wait for the old men to come in. And they come in and they go to, and I'm standing there and I just keep seeing 2 bottles, 2 bottles, 2 bottles. Everybody comes over, buys a couple bottles and walks out. And I'm like, well, I know I can barter with that guy anyway in the end of the world.
Right.
And I brought it home, grabbed the wife, was like, try this, tell me how bad it is. And we both had some shots and we were like, not bad. And I'm just saying, they don't call me an aristocrat for nothing.
And yeah, well, maybe I'm a little bit snobby. I've had some terrible whiskey in my life, and I try and stay away from it. But you bring up a good point. Doesn't mean you have to drink that $6 bottle of whiskey. You can have that on the shelf, sitting somewhere ready for an emergency. And I think everybody keeping a small bottle of whiskey around for emergencies that's a smart idea.
And by small bottle, you mean 35 to 100, right?
35 to 100 backups.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, I figure here's how that plays out, right? So either I'm at the point where I'm like, a $6 bottle of whiskey sounds pretty good about right now, or I'm like, I have a great barter item, so it goes either way. And hey, like I said, and now this goes back to the train like you fight.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's that. So if you guys have thoughts on cheap liquor that I could get, one, you could share it in the Facebook group, Prepping Badass group on Facebook. We also have a page that's, I think facebook.com/Prepping Badass is the page. You have ideas, thoughts, concerns, comments, you could let us know on there where we can get our cheap whiskey and what's the go-to. That would be appreciated. Maybe you want to email Kevin and tell him that he's too much of a, aristocrat himself, that he won't, he's too much.
He's not going to survive the apocalypse.
I don't even know how he's going to make it through. Maybe you want to comment on that. You could shoot him an email at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Now, we do get actually a decent amount of emails. We get about probably, I don't know, I think it's about 10 or 15 emails a week. And sometimes we see stuff and laugh. And it's funny because sometimes I forget to respond or whatever, because I read it and I'm like, that deserves like a big, explanation
and a thought
for a minute. And I'm like, I'm going to get to that. And then I'm like, shit, I got 8 more and I forgot. And I never got back to that guy. And then I feel like a dick, So if we're letting you down, I'm sorry. We do absolutely read them all and we appreciate them. And I really am trying to get back to them all. And that's the thing. Sometimes, like I had mentioned Tim or whatever, it was like he hit everything that Kevin was preaching on. And I'm like, Kevin's got to read that one and get back to him. And, I feel like a jerk if, I don't want to cut him short. So, but then Kevin procrastinates and is a jackass, leaves the guy hanging, hey.
What you going to do?
We're doing what we can do, right? That's it. We're all trying. So anyway, basically think of the downside. Maybe separate your stores, put things in separate areas. Have some, the goat bug out bag in your car, the get home bag. So what happens? You're on vacation, have a way to get home. Have a plan when you go somewhere. Have a fallback position maybe for your property. Maybe you got a buddy, Kevin was saying, maybe not right next door. Maybe you got a buddy 15 miles away. I got to say, in the apocalypse, 15 miles, that's in a whole new neighborhood. That's a new part of town. So have a backup plan. Have that water storage when you live in the desert. Have the fire extinguisher in your kitchen, right? These are the things that matter, and they're going to save your ass. Have some backup ammo. Carry a gun with you. What? I know it sounds wrong, and it's very scary right now, but carry that shit. And with that, stay safe, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
The Survival and Basic Badass podcast is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.